Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the importance of hitting the land market at the right time, which is sponsored by ForFarmers. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you will find this session enjoyable and we will get a lot out of it. We will try to keep the webinar down to an hour. My name is Grace Reid, and my role within NSA is the Scottish Region Coordinator. This webinar is open to everyone and not just NSA members. I would like to make the point that NSA is a membership organisation and we are highly dependent on our members as a source of income for us to present these webinars and do our work. So we represent our members and the UK sheep industry at key events and stakeholder meetings, which include topics such as Brexit, farm support schemes and climate change and land marketing. So please have a look at what we do on our website and social media pages, which will keep you up to date on our goings on. And we also have different membership brackets. So if you're under 27, you get the benefit of a half cost membership. So if you feel you can join us, then please do so, as it's a very small investment into your future if you choose to do so. I would like to introduce you to our speaker today, James Hague. A little background information on James. He's worked in the ruminant sector for over 30 years. Starting out in the family and local farms, and he's gained experience in the dairy, beef and lamb production systems. After leaving the family farm, James became involved in research at EHF ADAS Bridget's, followed by 8 years at Kingshay as a technical director. James and his wife Helen took on the tenancy of a dairy farm and diversified into delivering farm fresh milk and meat boxes to over 1,500 homes and businesses. If that wasn't enough, the family then moved to New Zealand, where James established a business offering consultancy to dairy and dry stock farmers. His business also developed systems, training and programming software for feed and fertiliser companies. James has returned back home to the UK and now heads up the marketing and technical department at ForFarmers. So I'll now pass you over to James, who will be running through his presentation, followed by a question and answer session at the end. If you have any questions throughout, just use the Q&A facility at the bottom of your screens. The chat function is also there, but please note if you post a question here, it may not be answered. And there will also be 2 polls throughout the session, and these will appear on your screens to vote on. So I'll hand over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Grace. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. So I'm going to present my screen now. So hopefully you can see that. You'll want to on screen. I'll try again. Grace, can you see that okay?
No, not just yet.
Right, let's see. Share. How's that? Can you see that?
Yeah, that's you now.
Marvellous. Very good. Yeah, so thank you for the introduction, Grace. So I'm Technical and Marketing Director at ForFarmers. I've been in the role for 2 years now. As Grace said, so I've got quite a diverse background, but a lot of my background was working in research and consultancy with farms. So and I always think the fortunate position of being a consultant is seeing a lot of diverse systems, a lot of people doing things very well, and a lot of people doing things that have got opportunities for improvement. But I wanted to start this talk really with just highlighting as an industry through these COVID times that we've had, we've actually been quite well in the sheep sector. I think what's really pleasing to see is that the household taste has not abandoned lamb for chicken, and we're seeing some quite good amounts of income coming into the sheep industry, obviously keeping that lamb price high. So it's good times at the moment. We've got the uncertainty of Brexit. That's the last time I'll mention that because nobody seems to know what's going on there. So we'll concentrate on the bits that we can influence. So as ForFarmers, we like to think that we can help farmers by being partners in profitability. So working with our customer base to try and explore for opportunities within that enterprise, whether it be sheep, beef, dairy, whatever it might be, to try and bring some extra profitability and sustainability into there. I put flock health on there because the welfare of our animals is absolutely critical, you know, to keeping our image, you know, and we all like to keep our stock well as well. The triangle that you see on there has got soil at the bottom, working up through foragers, and this is what we refer to as our total feed solution. So being a feed compounder, historically that always looked very much from the top of that pyramid and looking at cake first, you know, compound feed first, then down into blends, etc. Whereas our approach is very much looking from the bottom upwards. So looking at the whole enterprise and saying, look, if we improve soil on the farm, got the forage nutrition correct, then what do we need then to fill the gap between what we can produce on farm and what the genetic potential of the stock is that we've got, the environmental and the genetic potential that we've got on that farm. So we deal with, as you probably know, we deal with thousands and thousands of farms around the country. So get to see how those farms operate and the massive diversity that we've got in the UK, different soil types, different environmental conditions. It's about putting together packages which suit, you know, each farm individually. So so what I present today isn't so much a, you know, a blueprint as a understanding the mechanics behind how we can, you know, get these lambs away fitter and faster out of the system, how all that fits together. So stepping through, what is it that our farmer partners want? Looking to make more money out of the system, make things easier to operate so that they go more smoothly and achieve better results. So for all of those things there, it's about getting ewes fit for lambing and lactation. They're looking pretty good out there this year so far from what we've seen. I think that we have benefited from lambs getting away quicker in a lot of farms. The grass coming at the right time. It's kept growing, and in general, grass is still pretty healthy. There's some spots of rust developing out there, but grass is looking pretty healthy this year. Reduced losses between scanning and lambing. As Grace said, I spent 10 years in New Zealand, so a lot of big flocks over there. A lot of time was looking at the difference between scanning and lambing because there was considerable losses between those two events. How can we improve colostrum quality and milk yield in the ewes? How can we get better lamb birth weights and get these lambs off to a much quicker start, but also much more able to survive those early days? And then improve lamb growth weights consistently right the way through to finishing away. And then finishing faster to hit the market before everybody else piles in and prices come down. So I've gone back to the old Stocktake report, which is back from 2015, but there's some great stuff in there. Now got farm bench, but I'll just pull these things because, you know, not much has changed of late. But if we look at the average age to weaning, it was 116 days, which equates to 16.6 weeks. And so it's quite a long time before these lambs are weaned. So I always think that lambs can almost become parasitic to their mothers in that time. So getting them weaned off at about 3 months, at 12-week stage, means that the ewes have then got a bit more of a break to recondition before we start the cycle again. By the time we're selling lambs off, it's averaging 24 weeks. So I was from a farming family in Yorkshire, just off the just on the Pennines. We used to get a lambing percentage of about 180%. We had our own butcher shop, and the drive was always to try and get these lambs away within 14 weeks. as much as we can. So heavily creep feeding to try and move them through. So you know, I think one of the questions that we've got on there, and Grace, I can't just see how I can launch the questions on here, the polls. It's not quite showing on my, oh, here we are. Yeah, so I've got a first poll which I'll launch through. Hopefully you can see this coming up onto the screen. If you'd like to have a vote away with that, hopefully you can see what percentage of lambs are sold within 14 weeks after birth. So it's a question we're asking a lot of farms that we're dealing with to look at how quickly we can get lambs away. Voting's coming in. There's about a quarter of you voted so far. So there's also quite a few farms that we work with. It's a simple metric that we can use to benchmark that farm against that haven't got the figure to hand straight away. So it's, you know, it's relatively easy to calculate through. We're about 60% voted now, so a few more of you to vote. If you don't know, then please do say you don't know. But voting has slowed down. We've got past the 1 minute mark, so we'll call a halt to it there. So most of you have voted. Okay, so I'm going to share the results. Hopefully you'll be able to see these on the screen. I can't see that you can see those, but let's go with the basis that you can. So we've got 59% of you voted between 0 and 25%. So there's a quarter of lambs getting away within that 14 weeks. We've then got 35% voting between 25 and 50% lambs going away. So a question I'd raise is think about what the consequence of getting the, you know, a bigger percentage of those lambs, so like 60 to 70% of those lambs away, so like 14 weeks, could it be done? How quick do we need to grow these lambs? Is it cost effective to do so? You know, what will the end, you know, market price be if we were to do that? So thank you for voting in that. That's good. I can now turn that one off. So think about how quick we're getting these lambs away. So here's our market prices for the new season lamb, for new crop lamb. And hey, looking pretty good this year. I mean, well deserved. We do produce a cracking product in there. Disappointing to see the vote that we've had to try and keep some inferior products out of our market, because we do in this country produce to a very high standard. I've been very fortunate to have traveled the world, done a lot of work in Australia, New Zealand, America, Kazakhstan, remote places like that. And we are very good at what we do. So, you know, give yourself a pat on the back, because we do produce a high quality product. So those prices have been good this year, but as you can see from this data from AHDB, not always quite been the case. So, you know, hitting the market so we get the optimum balance between price in and cost out is quite, you know, is fundamental to profitability in the lamb job. I also put this up again from AHDB, who do produce some pretty good stuff, and there's a lot of it, and pulling it out to make it more commercial is part of our job. If you look here against feed use efficiency and growth rate, it's just the same for any enterprise, beef, sheep, dairy, whatever it might be. The more growth rate we can get out of these animals, the more efficient they're going to be at utilizing feed. One of my old jobs when I was at Kingsay was producing the forage costs to put into John Nick's, or we publish out ourselves at Kingsay. And all feed costs money. There's virtually nothing that's for free. Even grazed grass can be quite expensive at times. So getting feed use efficiency is fundamental to you know, making a margin from stock. So the faster we can grow these animals, looking at the genetic potential that we've got, we often talk about averages, but looking at individual genetics coming through in the flock there's quite often a very wide discrepancy between the best and the not quite the best on there. So as a nutritionist, if I go on farm, I'm really looking for my products to perform really well. They perform really well when we've got great quality forage in there, making life a lot easier, and the quality of stock that are in there are able to convert that feed efficiently into it. So trying to get these high growth rates does require, you know, some good breeding, good genetics behind. So if we go back to so our new season prices into there, if we were to lamb at the beginning of April, so the months there are sitting in the middle of the month, if we were to achieve 425 grams of daily live weight gain, which is possible, you know, we've got flocks that are doing that as an average, then the point at which we intersect with the high of the markets and the low, so take 2020 out of the equation, let's look at our 5-year range, is there's a significant difference there between hitting the bottom and the top. If we get 350 grams of daily live weight gain, then those lambs will be ready for sale, given a weight of about 440 to 42 kilos on there. Then there's quite a significant drop there. So we've lost nearly 45p a kilo there. If we look at 275 grams of growth over that period of time from lambing, then again we've dropped down a few more pence. And then if it's 200 grams, then yeah, we're hitting that market there significantly lower than where we started. So I'll put some more numbers around that in a moment. So this is a tool. We've got a thing called the Toolbox. And so it's a series of little computer apps that we're able to pull the figures from an individual customer, pop them in to this app, and then look at the consequence. So I've popped in a lambing, start lambing date there, and said, look, if we were to grow at 425, what would we hit the high of the market at? And on here, you can see that if we hit the high of the market at 425, it will deliver us 100 quid a carcass. If the market sits low, it will be 71 pounds a carcass. If we then look at the growth at 275, then we can see that that is 15 pounds lower at the low, and what's that, 17, 18 pounds lower at the high of the market. Multiply that by the number of lambs off the farm, and it can be some considerable amount of money that's in there. So thinking about the growth rate that we need to achieve to hit the market onto there, that's something, you know, we as a business, we help customers to look at, and then to build plans around what is the most optimal that we can achieve, given, you know, the genetics we've got on farm, the farm system we've got available, you know, the environment that we've got there available to us. If we look at the number of animals that are hitting confirmation as well, I think it shows, you know, a great opportunity for animals to be pulled into better carcass confirmation. And of course, with that better carcass confirmation, there comes the rewards of a better market price for the lamb. So what I've done with this is taken the new season lamb prices from the beginning of May to end of October. You know, all great stuff recorded on AHDB website. I've dropped it into an index to make it a little bit easier to see the numbers. But if we took that U3L there, 100, an index of 100, we can see that. So I get dropped down to an R, we're 2% drop from that, down to an O, 96%. So there's money to be made from getting the carcass confirmation, you know, at its optimal there, around that sort of like that 3L QE mark. A lot of that good confirmation comes from consistent growth, And so I was thinking it's about having a program in place to consistently grow stock. So every day on the farm is a day where we need growth. On the big picture of it, quite often with a customer, I'll take the total cost of production of the accounts, divide it down by 365 days in the year to get a total cost per day, and then divide it down by the average schedule, also like price per kilo. And that'll give me a figure of how many kilos of daily live weight need to be achieving to break even. And then we can step above that to work out where profitability needs to be. So if I need that to be 375 grams a day of growth, then if I'm only doing 275 and programming it for that, then the end of the year won't be quite as good as I hoped it would be. So very much about setting the expectations, and setting a plan for the year. So what are the key steps we need to hit that market? Number one, getting the ewes fit for lambing and lactation. It's all works on the cycle, doesn't it? And I don't think it matters where you start on the cycle, as long as we achieve these goals. So let's look at getting the ewes fit for lambing and lactation. We've got a pretty good position at the minute. I would guess in general, ewes are pretty fit. There's always a danger of getting ewes overfit, so it's a balancing act, as you know. But if we can get them at ideal body condition, then they are set up then with that reserve tank of energy that they need, of fat on the back. It's not just about the fat being there as a reserve. We also know from studies with dairy cattle that the fats that are contained within the system are essential for getting good blastocyst development and embryo survivals. So when we look at the next little bit, which is about reducing losses between scanning and sale, that's an important bit there. So I put this up. I won't go into this in any detail because there's some cracking stuff on HDB that does go into more detail. But on that cycle there, it's about breaking a bad cycle and getting into a good cycle. So if we look at reducing losses between scanning and sale, as I said, that's very reliant on having some of that body condition to be able to mobilize those fats contained within there to help with the development of the embryo and the survival of it. Again, if we look at some of that data from Eblex, HDB, if we look at the percentage of singles, twins and triplets, we've used that data to build into some of our tools. What I'd like to draw your attention to is that difference there between scanning and lambing range. Something I picked up in New Zealand is that ewes were grazing very close to the ground. So they were eating down through the leaves into the dead leaf material and also down into some of the aerial rooting as well. So when we get down on our hands and knees in the pasture now and we look at the effects of continual wetting and drying of our soils that we've seen for the last few years, big periods of waterlogging and then periods of dry, it's done a lot of damage to soil structure. So the plant responds by throwing up some aerial roots, and there's some dead material that's sat there that the ewes are going to graze down into. That's all got the potential for growing molds and fungus on there. And if those molds are host to kicking out a little bit of mycotoxin, then it can cause us some problems. So, ewes got 2 eggs in there, 2 viable eggs, get a mycotoxin challenge, T2, whatever it might be. It's going to, it might not kick out both of those, but it might kick out one. So we end up with single where we would have had a twin. So it's well worth looking at that. So it's about managing grazing to graze too low, and the other feeds that we've got in there, so are clean of that mycotoxin challenge, and we're not forcing these ewes to graze too low. I just stick this one in because it makes it easier just to look at the survival rate and the lamb birth weight of singles, twins and triplets. I think this is some stuff done in Australia. Just shows, you know, the large variation that we can get in there. So we're always going to be mindful of that, and make sure that we understand what the next crop of lambs is going to look like. So with our toolbox that we've got, and somebody asked a quick question, does our toolbox estimate cover Scotland and the premium for Scots lamb? No, it doesn't, but thank you for raising that, because our Scottish market is very important to us. So we will look at doing that. What we've done here is just try and model, you know, based on the scanning percentage that we've got and the number of ewes. So I've just stuck 100 ewes in to make it easy there. The number of likely singles, twins and triplets that we get. So we've got the number that have scanned, and then brought through the number of possible losses that we've got. Again, some good stuff on the old Eblex HTB stuff, showing what those loss rates might be, and therefore the number of lambs that are sold. So given a presumption of how many singles, twins and triplets from that scanning, then we can separate them out into groups for nutrition, and make sure that we're feeding for singles, we're feeding for twins, we're feeding for triplets, and that we make sure we've covered our bases on there. So so we try and get a vision of what there is in there, because if we can get these lamb birth weights up without causing ourselves too many lambing problems, then those lambs are ready to hit the ground, you know, firing all cylinders. Just on that lambing problem one, I said earlier about our pyramid with the soils at the beginning. Calcium is a very important element there for muscle tone, smooth muscle tone. So for good lambing, make sure that you can relax sufficiently and let the uterus open up for lambing. What we find is that a lot of farms have lost the art of liming. Now, you know, that might be always viewed as a pH correction issue, but liming brings a lot of calcium into soils. That calcium feeds through into the plant, and that plant then feeds through into the animal. So we find we do thousands and thousands of forage analyses. I think 35,000 analyses a year. A lot of those are coming back calcium deficient. Easy, quick fix, which costs a lot more to rectify, you know, nutritionally at the compound end, that we could have fixed very, very easily at the soil end. So we've got, you know, flock size is fairly big around the UK. Doing recording on individual animals, you know, is always tricky, but where you can do it, it's very valuable to keep those records. We've got some nice simple little sheets that can be printed off, available. Ask any of our account managers, they're available, just to keep a record of the ewe, what she's scanned at, body condition score. Just try and do a bit of analysis back into, you know, what's working well and what's not. So that's working well with, you know, with a customer base that, you know, it's highlighting where some of the weaknesses in the business are. So moving on then to improving colostrum quality and milk yield. Again, coming back to forage quality, it's so critically important because it is such a big component of the diet that, you know, if we can correct deficiencies from the soil upwards, we're on a much more cost-effective winner than we are trying to fix out the compound end. Mineralization of the ewes, you know, it's again trying to fix it. The compound, it becomes very generic, whereas looking field by field, you know, in some cases where the soil nutrient status is, allows us to correct that all important base in the diet. I mentioned about achieving lamb birth weights and improving lamb survival. All goes hand in hand, getting that thrift out of the lamb so they're hitting the ground, and that they're able to latch onto the ewe, but then they're going to start into forage so much quicker as well, and then be able to take the pressure off the ewe by getting those weaning dates, as close as we can to, sort of like 11, 12 weeks. And let's give these ewes a wee bit of a break if we can. These are some of our just standard programs where we look at feeding that ewe before and just after lambing. I always think about the ewe like a dairy cow. The vast majority of my time is spent with dairy cows, but they are, when it comes to lactation, they operate just like a much smaller dairy cow, and they've got huge milk potential. Any of you that milk sheep or have involvement with milking sheep, they can pump out some litres. If those litres are available for the lambs, it's highly nutritious for them, gets them away to a cracking start. Let's do it. So there's some programs there. I think these slides are going to be made available so you can look at the detail later. But again, it's very much about us creating individual programs for customers. Here are a range of some of the products that we do built into different farm case scenarios. What is it we're trying to achieve? Because we're trying to look at where the gaps are, that are stopping us hitting that market at the best price, getting these lambs away. Once those lambs are away, we've got more forage available to us on the farm. We can start building up reserves and get that cycle back on a good footing, as opposed to one which just progressively just edges down each year. Calcium is a good example of that. Every year we see calcium, diminished as it gets washed out into the system. So just looking on, multitasking, looking at some of the questions coming through as well. What percentage would you attribute the growth rate of the lambs? There's a question coming through to the lamb itself. Most of it appears to be down to the ewe before birth, and even after birth, the lamb is still reliant on the ewe. Yeah, absolutely. So we see that, that ewe is fundamental to that, because the quality of that milk coming through. I don't know if any of you have ever used a colostrometer on ewe colostrum. It's not something you could do with every ewe, but just taking a little snapshot of what you get through. Quite surprising, the variation that you get through. Just using a bricks meter is good because it quantifies it, and just getting just a cross sample of the farm, huge amount of variation in that colostrum, and it's it's that maternal transmission that helps that lamb get away to a really good start. The genetics comes to play about how milky that ewe is, how prone they are to mastitis, losing a quarter, being light on a quarter, temperament. If any of you got mules out there, you'll know just how pigheaded they can be at times. So yeah, a lot of it just come down to sort of the genetics filtering through into the ewe. But those lambs, they do need a good start. Nutritionally, a lot of that is in our control. So nutritionally, building through the reserves in that ewe is within our control. So it's all achievable. So just going to improving the lamb growth rates. Just doing a quick check on my turn there. No, we're all good. So lambs, a good birth weight, guess it makes life a lot easier. Minimizing worm and parasite burden goes without saying, and you've all got your programs in place, but it's very difficult making up nutritionally. If we've got something like liver fluke, that it tends to chew away at the gallbladder end of the liver, which then stops those gall juices coming through, which is so important with enzymes into digestion. So just get on top of it. Milk yield, body condition and forage quality, absolute must. So it's about getting into that cycle. We do a lot of forage analysis, a lot of soil analysis on beef and sheep farms. But what I would say is it's probably not enough, you know. So I think if we can correct some of those basics in the bottom, it will help us tremendously. So I pull out, this is some data I tend to use a lot. Just looking at, if we think about the effects of that consistent wetting and drying that we have seen over the last few years, that pasture has been under a lot of pressure, and it's created not very favorable soil structure. So if you take a whole field, you look at the bald patches that are in it, and then mentally in your mind try and take all those bald spots and push them to one end of that field. Surprising that they could be covering a third or even more of that field area. If they are trying to capture sunlight to convert through into sugars to feed the animal, then that's a third of our farm area that we've missed out on. I always think if you were to put a solar farm up, so take 10 acres, put a solar farm onto it, and a massive flock of seagulls came across after nicking a load of chips at the seaside, and they deposited all that guano onto that solar farm, you would see the needle on your electric generation going down. When we've got bald patches in that pasture, we don't necessarily see it like that, but what we do see is the energy yield significantly reduce. So as we miss out on the grasses and we pull weeds in that don't accumulate sugars, we see the dry matter yield drop off, but more importantly, we see the energy yield per acre, per hectare, whatever way you want to look at it, significantly dropping off. So our field isn't operating anywhere near 100%. So reseeding is very, very important in making sure we can, one, get dry matter yield in there, but also the newer varieties, you know, if you've got annual meadowgrass in there, it doesn't accumulate sugar. And it's sugar that newly lambed ewe needs to really get into lactation. So think about it as how much energy, how much sugar am I growing on this farm? So we then come on to a bit that I spend quite a bit of time playing around with formulations to try and match nutritional needs. That creep feed, you know, has to fulfill some fairly basic criteria. Needs to be palatable. It needs to be a good, robust pellet so that you're not getting pink eye from dust blowing around inside, you know, that creep feeder. So we build in palatability, so we use a flavorant to encourage the lambs. We use enhancers like yeast into there to help with rumen development, to you know, start getting that lamb's rumen really firing so you can make the most of the forages onto it. And then the nutritional additive packages we've got on there, all aimed around trying to help with the nutritional needs of there. So we build that into, from models about how the lamb grows. You know, it's about growing the skeleton, growing the muscle, and then putting the weight on. You know, a little bit of finish, a little bit of fat in the back. So we build a program up there to try and get these growth rates. So it's about predicting that. When we look at the feed market at the moment, it's you know, crazy town with a lot of raw material pricing. It's going through the roof. We're doing a lot of contracts at the moment. Thankfully, we've got a pretty good book available to us. So we're setting a lot of contracts in place because a lot of customers did see the real benefit of feeding these lambs well, getting them away quicker, and consequently have seen these ewes coming back in a much fitter condition into there. So return on investment back into that, it's all about making, you know, money to allow us to operate our businesses in a timely fashion and you know, do the right things at the right time. Return on investment is still good out of using a creep feed. Even better, where we can improve feed conversion efficiency by getting good quality forages and getting these lambs at a good birth weight into there. So if we can get those lambs away in a good time of fashion, it's going to leave those ewes great condition, ready for the next crop that we've got coming through next time, and maintaining that cycle at a higher level. So in summary, is about, you know, our role in ForFarmers is, you know, I don't want to make it too much of a advertorial, but it's about us understanding your business, being partners in your profitability, creating sustainable systems. So there's just a couple of questions just come through. Are there any heritability figures for feed conversion efficiency? I think the answer to that is early days. I was doing quite some work with ST Genetics on the dairy front, and they've got a metric called EcoFeed now, which looks at taking the calf, taking its genetic material, taking the calf and putting it onto a feed evaluation unit from birth right the way through to first and second lactation, and monitoring the genetics and correlating it with dry matter intake and production. So genomics is coming through very, very strongly now, that if we can correlate genomics with feed conversion efficiency, then gosh, it's moving us forward much, much quicker. Next question is, when you talk about calcium being deficient in forage, is that on the basis of plant need or the animal? The answer is both. So if we think about what creates a healthy plant, if you look at a lot of new varieties of grass, they're coming through, they're being chosen on disease resistance, and they become quite waxy. They've got a very, very waxy coating on there, which helps to protect them from many fungal pathogens from the outside, or any, you know, any bugs eating them, etc., like that. But if you think what calcium does in a cell, it makes that cell very strong. So, and it helps with protection. In the animal, again, it's helping with the protection of the cell, but also the strength of, you know, that animal's ability to fight infection. So it follows all the way through. Good for the plant, good for the thing. Question: I didn't think you could measure ewe colostrum with a refractometer due to the higher fat levels compared to cattle. The answer is it's relative onto it. So you can't necessarily use the cattle metrics on there, but what you can do is mark down. So take, you know, 10 animals, get the colostrum and look at them relative and just see how much variation you've got on there. Is it true that when sending lambs dead weight, the more white the fat cover, the more cereal based the diets and grass, more yellow fat? Yeah, anybody that's had some butter in America will know just how white that butter is. It almost looks like lard. So the omega-3s that feed through into the grass produce that nice yellowing of the fat that we've got. Some markets like yellow fat, some markets like white fat. But the omega-3s coming through in that grass, yeah, they come into. We use a product called Lintec, which is very rich in omega-3s that we can use to manipulate that colouring of the fat. So if we need more yellow fat, we'll bring in Lintec to bring more omega-3s into you know, into that fat deposit on the animal. So yeah, absolutely. If you want white fat, keep it more cereal based. But a lot of the systems that we've got there should be more than enough grass in there in the system on those omega-3s. Just be careful of silage, that we can, if we haven't got a great preservation on there, lose those omega-3s. So the use of a good additive in there to get fast fermentation, you know, and just stop so we're going through. Yeah, it's going through. There's one a little bit more complex. I might come back to that one later on. So does gender have a role to play in finishing rate? Yes, it does. So obviously, so like the male. Interestingly, doing that work with ST Genetics on sexed semen. Great work out of Canada looking at the effects of milk yield for heifers that have heifer calves. So those heifers go on to have more milk about them than one that has a male calf. So you find that the sex of the lamb feeding through does have an effect on how milky that animal is going forward out onto it. So yeah, I've got more specific data. If you get hold of an account manager with ForFarmers, we can supply more detailed information about effects of whether male or female. So I'll come back to a few of those questions in a minute. I'll just finish off with the presentation, and then sorry, that one out of the way. There you go. Flock health obviously is critical. I always like it when customers make us nutritionists look good by having all the ducks in a row and having all the worming programs all the way through, etc. So that brings an end of. I'll just do the last couple of questions on there. How efficiently converted is that Lentec product to grass in terms of the amount of omega-3 in the meat? Good question. I think when we look at the passage of fatty acids that go through the animal, they get into the rumen where some of the fatty acids that we've got are not very good for the bacteria that live there. They will kill off rumen bacteria. So the rumen bacteria, to try and stop that happening, will biohydrogenate. So what they do is they take some of the double bonds between the carbons and stick some hydrogen on there to make, I always think of it as a key. There's keys there, the shape of a key, the shape of the fatty acids will kill off some of the bacteria. The bacteria will change the nature of that key shape so that it can't kill off that bacteria. So we see things going from an 18.3 fatty acid down to an 18.2, an 18.1, etc. on the way through. We do know that some of the 18.1s that come down through the fermentation pathway can turn off milk fat synthesis in the udder. So they create a key that once it gets into the udder will significantly reduce the milk fat content. So milk fat drop syndrome. It's very common in dairy cows. It's also common in flocks as well, but obviously we're not measuring that fat in the same way. So rumen stability is absolutely fundamental, which is why we will use the way of formulating that we use, a system called MELK, thinks about how well that rumen is stabilized. We'll use things like yeast in there, so we heavily use things like levucel to stabilize the rumen and try and manipulate the fermentation so that we stop it having those bad pathways and dropping that down. Products like Lentec are very effectively put through into the milk, so we do know that we will get that flow through of omega-3. They're also very good at reducing methane. We don't push that as a thing, but they do have a methane reduction effect by manipulating the bacteria within the rumen. So I'm just checking my time. I think I've come to my 3/4 of an hour. Does sustainably produced soya cause your sourcing systems any problem? Very, very topical. Been talking about soya this week. So we are members, in fact, we're founding members of a number of schemes. So when we look at RSPO for responsible sourcing for palm oil, we're founder members of that. For soya, we cover all of our soya sourcing requirements. So they're all covered by credits. we responsibly use soy. We've got a Nutrition Innovation Centre, NIC, based in the Netherlands, that are constantly doing research, looking at how we can get protein smarter. So, the formulations that we pull in really is about supplying specific amino acid needs to the ewe to feed itself, and then feeding protein needs to the rumen bacteria to produce microbial protein. So, you know, we are looking at how we can responsibly use soya. It's a cracking feed. You know, it's been very valuable to us over the years. Let's try and use it. A lot of it is produced sustainably. You know, let's not think it's all bad. You know, we're helping to put credits back into making sure that those soya production systems are sustainable. Yeah. A question around the Lintec: are there any trials based on reducing methane using that product? Yes, absolutely there are. And we can show, we've got a system called Visiolac we use on dairy cows, where we can monitor, you know, from every milk sample that's taken from a bull tank, how that's working. So we've got some great data behind that. Again, our innovation centre, we have a team of 5 full-time scientists that work on this to look at it. So yeah. Question there. So many sheep flocks, possibly more so with the LMS, are kept on low input grasslands with implied lower performance levels. How does this square with production efficiency in these flocks? So I'll come back to, I think pretty much like third slide on there with our pyramid. For farmers, it's about us helping you to create the best out of your farm system. So a low input system might only be using a little bit of compound, might be using very limited amount, maybe some blocks, some lick blocks into there. But okay, we can help improve the base foragers with our forage team. We've got a great team of agronomists and specialists within our teams that can help look at that grassland-based system, look at soil structure, dig some holes, get some soil tests done, get some analysis done on the foragers, and try and build back a rotation system or an overseeding program, or a use of varieties into there, even feeding clover seed back to stock in there. We can even put that back into lick blocks if you want, to try and get those systems working well. So yeah, any cost analysis resulting from feeding creeper grass for a flock like in April due to fat lambs finishing quicker. Yes, we do. I had actually pulled those slides out, but I don't. If you'd like to email me after the event, if that's allowed, james.hague@forfarmers.eu, Hague spelled H-A-G-U-E, as in the place in the Netherlands, then quite happily come back to you on your questions onto there. So yeah. So in your opinion, what is the fastest growing breed? I'm a bit of a Texel man myself, so I do take a bit of dragging away from Texels. I think that's just a bit of personal bias coming through into there. And then there's a longer question there, which from Moldova. If you'd like to drop me an email, I'll answer that one specifically. So I hope that's of been used to you. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for your attendance. And I'll pass back to Grace.
Thank you, James. And on behalf of NSA, I'd like to thank you for your fantastic presentation, and also to ForFarmers for sponsoring it. We definitely highlighted the issues at hand there and what we all need to do to get our lambs finished quicker so we can get more money for them. So we hope you've enjoyed the webinar and you've learned something. If you've any other questions, just pop them through to us. It's inquiries@nationalsheep.org.uk or to James himself. This webinar is recorded and will be put online later on this evening. And if you have any comments for any future webinars, please get in touch too. Thank you.
Thank you. And Grace, thank you, the NSA.
Thanks.